Hello there everyone, Matt here with thevirtualinstructor.com, and in this video I'd like to share with you several of the drawings that were created as part of the course Subjects with Pen and Ink, and I'd also like to share with you one of the complete lessons from that course as well, so be sure to stick around for that. Now this course was created during the month of October of 2019 and consists of 31 drawing lessons on a variety of different subjects using different forms of pen and ink application techniques, including nib pens, technical drawing pens, and ink wash. We also use hatching, cross hatching, stippling, squiggly lines, and of course ink wash. Now, to access this complete course, you can follow the link in the description below and you can learn more about this course. Now with that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at the drawings and then we'll get into the lesson. So here in front of me I have a big old stack of drawings. These are all the drawings minus one from the course, and that one drawing that's not in the stack was given away as a gift. So you can see just how many drawings were created as part of this course. This is a big old thick stack of drawings. Now in the course, of course, we covered a variety of different subjects. Each subject that we discuss is broken down into a lesson series. So instead of just doing one drawing for each subject, there's several. Now the last lesson series in the course all centered around portrait drawing and people, and you can see this is a portrait drawing. This was the last drawing as part of the course series. This is clearly a self-portrait. This is on smooth Bristol paper, and I used nib pens. So those are the more traditional way of applying ink to the surface here, and clearly this is cross hatching. We'll move on here. Another drawing from the last series where we discussed people is clearly a drawing of a skull. We need to discuss what's underneath the face as well, underneath the skin. This is a drawing that's created on smooth Bristol paper. We also used nib pens for this drawing, but we used hatching in this case instead of cross hatching, which presents its own set of challenges, but it also gives it a very distinct, or gives the drawing a very distinct look, and also helps us to create the illusion of form and texture. We also discussed drawing an eye. Of course, everyone loves to draw eyes, so we draw an eye in the course. This uses hatching, mostly hatching here, but there is a bit of cross hatching in here as well. And we also discuss ink wash as part of the course, and this is one of the figure drawings that we created here. Now, ink wash is a very similar approach to using watercolor. Of course, the ink is less forgiving than watercolor, but since it is a water-based application where we're thinning out the ink by adding water, it is advisable to work on watercolor paper. This is hot press watercolor paper, 140-pound hot press watercolor paper. I also went in with a bit of the nib pen and just accentuated some of the edges here and added just hints of texture here and there. Now, of course, we also drew a human hand. Now, the hand is a subject that a lot of people think is incredibly difficult to draw, but when you break it down into basic shapes, it becomes so much more easier to draw, and that's really true of any subject that you draw. For this hand, we used technical drawing pens and we used hatching, and this is actually the lesson that I'm going to share with you today. We'll get started here on smooth Bristol paper, and I'm going to start here with an H graphite pencil, and we're going to break the hand down into basic shapes. The first shape we're going to see is somewhat of a rectangular shape that makes up the palm of the hand. Now, of course, we're seeing the back side of the hand here. Then we're going to go ahead and extend an overall shape for all of the fingers. So we're going to look at the outer parts of the fingers themselves and try to break this down into an overall shape here, and you can see that there's a little bit of a bend in that shape at the middle finger, working its way over to the pinky. Then we're going to draw a triangular shape that makes up the rest of the palm of the hand, extending out towards the thumb. Then once we've got these basic shapes in place, we can go in and start developing each one of the fingers. We're going to start here with the thumb. The thumb is basically made up of two sections. Of course, these sections are divided at the joint of the thumb. So we're going to draw both of these sections with just some basic shapes here, extending out from the shape, the triangular shape that we drew, extending the palm. Then we're going to do the same thing with the remaining fingers, just breaking them down into segments. Each segment, of course, is dividing the finger up at each one of the joints. This makes drawing the shape of the fingers so much easier. And of course, here you can see I'm refining the contour line as I go just a bit, because these aren't straight lines. There are little bumps, there's indentations, there's slight curves that happen all along each one of the shapes for the fingers. We'll move on now to the middle finger, again just breaking it down into shapes, and of course we're using that overall shape that we drew initially to help us determine how long we need to make each one of these fingers. Then we'll move it down to our next finger, and of course we're sticking here with just breaking it down into basic shapes, each segment of the finger down into basic shapes. Now, a lot of people think that hands are very, very difficult to draw, but when you break a subject down like a hand into basic shapes, it becomes super easy to draw, because then we're not thinking about drawing a hand. Instead, we're thinking about drawing the shapes that make up the hand. And of course, this can be applied to any subject that you decide to draw, whether it's a hand or anything else. After drawing the shape for the pinky, now we can begin refining the contour lines even further, looking at those small little folds that happen throughout this particular image here. There are overlapping elements. As we can see, the top portion of the hand overlaps portions of the thumb, and then of course the fingers overlap portions of the bottom portion of the palm as well. We'll go ahead at this point and start defining some of the areas where we see contrast in value. So we're going to be basically planning out the areas of shadow that we see here. Our light source is originating from the upper right, mostly above, but slightly to the right. This is going to produce areas of strong core shadow on the lower portion of each one of the fingers, the palm, and the wrist. So again, we're going to be planning these out with basic shapes. We'll also go ahead and start defining some of the details like the fingernails, and also the wrinkles that we see in each one of the joints. We'll continue defining each one of the fingernails and each one of the wrinkles over the top of each one of the joints, working our way down, taking it just a finger at a time. Now, of course, it's easy to just think, oh, well, I'll just draw a fingernail here. But again, we still need to pay attention to the photo reference, because each shape that we create for the fingernail is slightly different from the one before. Now that we've got our graphite sketch in place, we'll go ahead and start with our technical drawing pens. We're going to be using a Stiegler technical drawing pen 0.05 millimeter for this entire drawing. We'll start by defining the contours, of course, and you can see here on the wrist of the hand, we're going to use that contour line to indicate some of the hairs that happen here. And then we'll continue working our way around to the top portion of the hand and working our way down to the bottom portion. Again, paying close attention to those overlapping elements. You can see on that middle finger how that line continues overlapping the palm. We can see this up at the top, right underneath the thumb, as well as that line extends out towards the base of the palm. And at the bottom portion, we see some of those wrinkles are affecting the contour line, so we'll make sure to include those slight curves that happen down there. Now we'll go ahead and start with the development of the values, and as we develop the values, we're going to be developing the texture as well. We'll start by just outlining the strongest shadow we see here on the wrist, and then we'll start with a bit of hatching here. Now, of course, these lines need to flow over the form of each one of the planes of the hand, so you can see here they're going up at a diagonal as they work their way up the side of this part of the hand. And of course, as the values get slightly lighter, we'll use broken lines to indicate the hatching here. And of course, in the areas where we see darker value, we'll need to add additional strokes here. As you can see, I'm going back in and adding some more hatching here to make the values a little bit darker. As we work our way up to the upper portion of the wrist, we're seeing some lighter tones here. We're still seeing some darker values, but for the most part, this is a much lighter section. So you can see our directional strokes have changed because the plane in this particular section is changing as well. We're still going to add some hatching here and there to address some of those darker tones, but of course, we're going to leave more open areas because we're seeing lighter values. Up along the top, we'll add a slight curve here to our hatching marks, again to help to indicate the form. Then it's back to the bottom of the wrist, and here we're just reinforcing some of those lines that we created for the wrinkles, just making those lines a little bit thicker. Then we'll continue working our way to the right, again, just creating that area of strong shadow on the bottom portion of the palm. But we need to pay close attention here because it is darker in value at the very bottom. There is a slightly lighter area before getting darker again. So we're going to leave an area where we're making marks a little bit more in a sparse fashion before, again, creating lines that are closer together. We'll do the same thing up here on the top part of the hand where we're seeing a darker value followed by a lighter value and then a darker value again. And then we're going to go back to the bottom again, reinforcing those lines that we're creating for the wrinkles. So as you can see, I'm working from the left side of the picture plane to the right. Again, that's because I'm right-handed. I want to keep the palm of my hand out of the way of the ink so it doesn't smear as we work. So you'll notice I'm going up to the top of the hand, back to the bottom of the hand, to the middle of the hand as we work our way across. Of course, we do see a lot of wrinkles and a lot of changes in tone and value in the middle portion of the hand. We need to pay close attention to the directional strokes that we make in this section, and a lot of this information we can just derive from the photo reference. If you look closely, you can kind of see a pattern of where the values, the shapes of the values kind of give you an indication of what direction you need to make the strokes. So as long as you're following that, you're gonna have a good idea of what direction you need to make the stroke in each section. Of course, you can combine this with the knowledge of what's happening on the form itself. So as we can see up here with the thumb, as the thumb curves around on the bottom portion, of course, those lines are going to need to curve as well as we develop the shadow here. Of course, we're going to be cautious. We want to make sure that we don't get too dark with our value applications as we work. We can always go back and make sections darker if need be. But as we're working with this first pass, we're trying to make sure that we don't get too dark too quickly. There's a lot of information here on the back side of the hand. There are veins, there are wrinkles. It's easy to get lost in all that information and feel overwhelmed or feel like you need to include absolutely everything that you see. But remember, with a pen and ink drawing, it's a process of simplifying what you're seeing down into lines in this case. So we need to keep in mind that we're simplifying what we're seeing. We just want to communicate the subject to the viewer. We can't copy the photo reference exactly, so we need to think about the areas where we're seeing the darkest value, the midtones, and the lighter values, and basically think of a way that we can communicate this through our application of the lines. And as you can see here, this is a great example where we're seeing these veins that are happening here. We're just basically defining the shadowed area that happens on the bottom of these veins. You can see the curvature of the line is helping us to understand that this is a curved surface, a smaller curved surface in these locations, which of course will translate to the subtle indication of some of those veins. Of course, we'll continue working our way over to the right, again, just taking it a small section at a time. And as we're working, we're making comparisons to the other sections that we've already developed, just making sure that the values in the section that we're developing at the moment are matching and making sense with the other areas that we've already addressed. You can see here we're working our way to the pinky here, and of course we see an area of strong shadow on the bottom side of the pinky, so we'll concentrate the hatching marks here. But of course, for all of these little subtle wrinkles and things, we'll still need to continue adding some hatching here and there. For now, we'll work our way up to the top couple of fingers, and again, we're going to have to make a curved line here. You can see how this line curves as it makes its way around the form of the finger, straightening out almost to a vertical stroke in the middle, and then again, curving at the top. We'll add a few indications of wrinkles. Now, of course, these wrinkles on each one of the joints breaks the mold a little bit. They're going to go against some of the hatching marks that we've created around it. But of course, that's just additional contrast. Of course, contrast created by changing the directional stroke instead of the value. Now, since our light source is originating from above, we're going to make the line on the bottom edge of our fingers and the palm of our hand just a little bit thicker to help to communicate that stronger shadow. We'll continue with this approach on our middle finger here, again allowing our stroke to curve as we work our way around the form of the finger. And then of course developing that strong shadow that happens on the lower portion of this finger. And then again, strengthening up the line on the bottom, just making it slightly thicker so that we can get an idea that that shadow is really strong. This thicker line, of course, helps to communicate the form of the finger as well. We'll continue out this vein a little bit further, again, making those slightly curved marks. And then on the inside of the shadow that we see in between fingers, you can see that this line is also slightly curved with concentrated marks closer to the lower portion, allowing those marks to become more sparse as we work our way up. Now moving on to our fourth finger, we've got a pretty good idea of what we need to do here. Again, making these hatching marks so that they curve around the form of the finger and then concentrating the marks in the area of shadow. Of course, as we address each finger, we shouldn't neglect the fact that there is a little bit of shadow that we see on each one of the fingernails. This is addressed again using just slightly curved hatching marks. Then we'll move on to the pinky, again just continuing this approach, allowing these hatching marks to curve around the form of each one of the fingers. And then, of course, as we work our way down, we'll also thicken up the line on the bottom portion, again just adding additional weight and that illusion of shadow. We'll continue this line all the way across the bottom of the palm of the hand here. This is just a slightly thicker line, but it does make a difference. Now we can evaluate the drawing and see that we need to make some of the shadows a little bit darker, so we'll go ahead and go back into the areas of darkest shadow with additional hatching. We'll address some of the veins again, and then of course some of the darkest shadows that we see on the wrist and on the bottom portion of the palm, and also on each one of the individual fingers. This additional contrast, of course, helps to further the illusion of form. We'll do the same up here on the upper portion of the palm where we see some of those darker tones. And then after our ink is allowed to dry completely, we can use a kneaded eraser to erase any remaining graphite lines. And now our drawing of a hand using hatching is complete. Thanks so much for watching this video. I hope you were able to pick up a thing or two here and there. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, what are you waiting for? Go ahead and hit that subscribe button. If you want to check out 3 of our course videos and ebooks for free, you can do so. There's a link in the description below this video. And if you want to check out the course, Subjects with Pen and Ink, there's also a link in the description below this video as well. As always, I wish you all the very best in your artistic success.